Hayman's on with NACA.
Hey, good evening. All right, it's 7. Let's roll. Or, yeah, what the heck?
And just as the heads up to everybody, we are recording today's Zoom, so it will be posted to the website for a recording of our presentations today. So
Good, excellent. Well, welcome everybody. EAA 234. Just a quick note: we're in the process of making a donation to Northwoods Hardware in Glen Arbor for face masks for Bentsen. So if you care to donate, you can go on our website and off you go. All right. Jim Serby and I talked a little bit about the changes that are afoot, and one of them is the tower is going to limited hours. I think it's 8 to 4. Is that correct?
Yes. We're already actually in the limited hours right now.
Yeah. So that's gives us a bit of caution because we're dealing with the 121 crowd. You know, the aircraft Allegiant, Delta, those guys flying in, and the one concern we have is the fact that a lot of times Minneapolis doesn't release the aircraft until they're pretty close. So one countermeasure I have is that if I'm ever flying around Traverse, well, actually all the time, I'm always listening to center, no matter where I am, to get a good idea of who else is out there. So what we'd like to do is have the FAA guys. We have Ty Hayman, who is our NATCA rep local. I see Matt Adams is aboard, and Mr. Forsman's here. So why don't you guys, the meeting's yours. Give us talk to us about the changes you see, what we should be looking out for, any pitfalls or traps. And whichever one of you wants to start, please go.
Okay, it takes me a second to take this, Ty Hayman. It takes me a second because I mute my phone until I'm talking, so that way it kind of cuts down on background noise. Okay. I know for what I've seen personally, and Nick's up in the tower quite a bit too, so he can vouch for a lot of this. We've been kind of fighting an uphill battle with Minneapolis because they have a tendency to basically, on VFR days when we're advertising visual approaches, they take the air carriers and they clear them on a visual approach and aim them right at the VOR. And I know I talked with Mr. Sorby a little bit about this or whatever, but basically, you know, we'll have people doing practice approaches, practice holdings or whatever. And we'll tell center that we have traffic holding over the VOR. We'll give them a heads up, and they'll still do the same procedure. You know, we've kind of tried to go down the avenue a little bit of trying to get our own local radar approach control. It's called the TRACAB, basically. But that's a big uphill battle because they'd probably have to pay us more. And I don't think the FAA is into that just yet. I think they need to hear it from people who have a little more, I guess, pull. Like our District 1 Representative Jack Bergman. I had him scheduled once to come into the facility, but then we had the government shutdown. So he had to cancel, and we also weren't allowed to give tours during that time. And then obviously right now with COVID-19, the pandemic going on, we're not allowed to give tours or have any extra bodies in the facility. So we're down to a minimal staffing crew just based on the traffic count index that we use to kind of predict the traffic. So that's also why our hours got curtailed because we weren't seeing the traffic. There wasn't as much flying going on and whatnot. So if there's something that you want to piggyback on that, Nick or Matt, feel free to. I'll shut up for a second, mute my phone.
Yeah, an experience that I can share, just knowledge of how that en route environment works is they are looking at a lot more airspace than our tower controllers typically would. And so the area of their radar scope that represents Traverse City Airport is relatively small. So in terms of, you know, recognizing conflictions, sometimes it's more difficult to recognize those conflictions when you're not as zoomed in on the airspace and able to see that spacing. So that might be one of the challenges with the en route controllers. The other reality is that they're used to dealing with spacing in terms of hundreds of miles. And us as terminal controllers, whether it's an approach controller or a tower controller, we have a different set of skills, and we have better tools, and we're better practiced at dealing with situations close into the airport environment. So when you have center controllers that are working out conflictions versus when you have a tower or an approach control working out conflictions, you're going to have a different experience just by virtue of the different kind of work that we do. Good or bad, that's just the reality of the difference between when we're there in the tower working with you guys and when you have just the en route control, or excuse me, the center controllers dealing with the whole show.
Is the and there's no countermeasure for that presently, except awareness.
Yeah, awareness that's the key, is to make sure that you guys are actively monitoring the traffic advisory frequency and have an awareness of, you know, what's going on in the environment around you. If you have the ability to monitor the center and CTAF simultaneously, I think that's a great practice. Yeah. And if any of you are aware of your voluntary safety reporting programs, you know, CISP is one that the airlines use as a means to report unsafe situations. You know, that's a good practice too. If you see something that's happening, especially if it's happening consistently, it's never a bad idea to bring that information forward so that we can address those things as they happen. It's much easier to take a specific event and address that than to have somebody say, well, generally over the last year, we've had numerous experiences. That's difficult to pin down, but when you bring us something that we can look at specifically, that's helpful too.
So is there a form for that? Or is it just call you guys to say, hey, this happened?
I personally have fielded a lot of calls at my previous air traffic facility when something like that has happened. You know, there's nothing wrong with calling the tower and sharing information. You certainly could go the route of talking to a FSDO person. You could call the center as well if you wanted to talk to the center if it was a center involved issue, but nothing wrong with calling an air traffic facility and sharing an experience, whether it's good or bad, so that we can learn from that.
Yeah, that, and to go along with that, for you guys for the reporting stuff, don't be afraid to file NASA reports. Like, they're there for a reason. It's the equivalent of what the airlines, and we have our own version as well. But to go and see, I think Jim asked the question here. It's like, and the flight following for practice approaches and all that, absolutely call the center and ask for that stuff. Practice approaches might be hit or miss whether they actually take you to do it, but flight following, for the most part, if you're just going to be in a practice area, they'll likely give you flight following. For practice approaches, it's traffic dependent and depends on how many airspaces they're working as well, because they've been combined up a lot as well too.
Oh, due to COVID right now? Yeah, they're down on minimum staffing as well, so they're combining up. Most of the UP and Northern Michigan's usually all one airspace now, and usually it's two. So they're looking at a whole lot bigger area than they normally work now. Wow. The frequencies remain the same for Northern Michigan and down here, though, correct?
Correct. Yeah, frequencies are all still the same, but that's another thing to think about, though, is when you're calling them asking something and they don't answer you for a minute, it's probably because they're talking on another frequency 100 miles away too, or they're listening to 3 people on 3 different frequencies all hollering at them at once.
Yeah, that begs another question. It's no longer a Kalamazoo approach, or is it what's the term? Michigan?
Great Lakes.
Great Lakes. So is that just a name change, or is there more behind that?
That they took all of the TRACONs from Muskegon. Let me think about this. Muskegon, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Lansing, Saginaw, and Flint, and put them all in one building in Kalamazoo. So practically speaking, it's no different for you guys. And the frequencies are all still the same for the areas that you would normally be calling. That, you know, with all the charted frequencies, those are all still the same. It's just all those people are in a different building in Kalamazoo now.
Okay, all right. We've been trying to get down there. We've been weathered out, I think, 2 years now. So just get a tour and understand what it's like on the other side of the
Just to speak more on the staffing issue. So the agency's posture right now is that we're staffing to traffic. So we've adjusted our hours to meet the traffic needs at each facility. Some facilities reduced their hours, some facilities did not. Some facilities have reduced their staffing at any given time during the day more than others have. Some facilities have slowed down significantly. For us, as an example, on Sunday we ran 18 operations during the day, and we've yet to be over 100 operations in the last couple of weeks. where we normally might be sitting at 350 to 450 operations this time of year. So, but there are other facilities in our district alone that their traffic has not decreased significantly. Their flight schools are still going, and their operation is much closer to a normal operation than it is in Traverse City. So the goal for us is not to reduce staffing for the sake of reducing staffing. Our goal is to meet the needs of the traffic that's there. So if we're hearing that traffic is picking up and there's a necessity to do something different, then we're going to evaluate that.
So will you, you'll reassess when NMC comes back online?
I had a conversation with one of their instructors yesterday, and right now they don't have a date when they expect to come back. They are looking at dates in the middle of June to possibly start flying again. But if they get out there and start their operation and we see that we need to make adjustments to meet that need, we will do that.
Right. Wow. Huh. Okay, good. All right. Pretty good. Jim Serby, anything? You had some questions floating around there?
Well, I was wondering if the after-hours air traffic carrier or the local air carriers have reduced their after-hours arrival and departures. They used to have a number of evening arrivals and departures. I wonder if they have reduced those?
Yeah, all of the air carrier operations coming in and out of Traverse City have reduced significantly from what they normally would be.
Okay. Well, one of my concerns, and it came up the other day, I was flying our airplane, and we were doing some maneuvering over Empire Airport, and we were using flight following just for the maneuvering, and they picked us up and it was good. So we were worried about arrivals coming into 10 that day. But on the way back, sure enough, we had to deviate a little bit to the south and stay south of the center line for 10 as a regional jet came down the visual for 10. And I don't believe I ever heard him call until it was fairly late, and I was warned by the tower he was coming, so that was great. My fear is if I'm out there after hours, how am I gonna know that guy's there or he's coming in? And that's one of my concerns going forward. These guys are doing 200 knots and they're probably calling 20 miles out. And if I'm in the pattern at 7 o'clock at night, my time around the pattern is going to take longer than it's going to take that guy to do the 20 miles, and so that's why I'm a little concerned. And so,
do you have a second radio in the airplane, Jim?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I would, on the second radio, if you can, I would listen to center at that point. So then you have CTAF on the one you're talking on and just listen to the center, like even just turn it down just a little bit, but just have it just sitting there in the background. So you're listening to that as well.
All right. So that sounds like the number one safety thing is monitor center. And secondly, if you can get center to pick you up for flight following while we're doing approaches, it sounds like is another good suggestion for safety.
Now they're just, I got an email from the Michigan Fast team, and they sort of clarified a question I have. Lake Ann Airport is noted as objectionable. I think that's the term. Yeah, objectionable. And I thought, well, what the hell? The runway is pretty short. And then last month I was out there, and just happened to notice one of the 121 guys coming in over the field. And I thought, all right, so basically that little airport is right below the flight path for 10. And do you see the traffic coming in and out of Lake Ann?
We'll see. Depends on, well, are you ADS-B equipped or not?
I am, but there's a guy with a little Cessna 120 who's not.
That's not, yeah, that's the hard part. I know there's a lot of hills and stuff out that way. Like here at the airport here, we'll pretty much guaranteed see on radar, assuming everything works. We'll see usually out of 1,400 feet or so MSL, 1,200 sometimes. Usually by 1,400 feet, you'll see them all day long. And a lot of times we can see a couple 200 feet off the runway. It just depends on what, the atmosphere plays with the radar and all sorts of stuff. But out at Lake Ann, I'm sure it's the same way. If there's a couple hills or something in between you and the antenna out at Empire or whoever it is, then they won't show up. But once they get up above those hills, theoretically, we should be able to see them no problem.
Yeah, there's a ridge just the west of on the east-west runway.
Yeah, once they get above that, there should be no problem.
All right. Okay. All right. Yeah, in fact, I just mentioned the guys out there. I said just be aware that you're right under the flight path, for traverse. Oh, really? Yeah, really. So, okay, cool, good. All right. Well, I'm educated a little bit. Good. So, the tray cab, is that you guys consider that an uphill issue, or just getting somebody's attention?
Yeah, it's a pretty unique situation like we have here at Traverse City. There's not a ton of facilities that have going on what we have going on. We've wanted that tray cab for quite a while, and I know there was a previous air traffic manager, him and I started trying to push it up the chain, and then right off the bat we were met with pretty much a roadblock. So like I said, the FAA, I personally, and this is just an opinion, I can't say factually because I can't represent the FAA, but I can represent the union. It's the union's opinion basically that, the FAA needs to hear it from someone who has a little more clout and a little more power that would get their attention, such as a District 1 representative or whatnot. So I know me personally, that's one of the avenues that I wanted to visit, was getting Jack Bergman into the facility to see how the operations ran and how much smoother it would be in comparison to a facility that has an approach control over it. Because another option we looked at was having Green Bay provide our approach control over us so they could run it a little bit tighter. The operations, and it would be a little more safer having a facility that's more familiar with a terminal environment versus a center environment. Like Matt was saying, in a center environment, those guys are looking at a humongous amount of airspace. And to them, it's like, Traverse City is just a little blip on their radar scope. So, it's definitely an idea, I guess, that we're trying to entertain, and that we're trying to get some kind of movement on, but I don't foresee that happening anytime soon.
Okay. Does GR have a tray cab or Flint or?
No. No, their approach control is that where the approach controls were all combined up. They called it, in the FAA, it was called the 804 program. So basically they combined all those approach controls down at Kalamazoo.
Yeah.
So it's just like the facility still had their own approach control. It's just they're located in a different building now.
All right.
Well, maybe we can carry a little water on that subject. We should talk about that, Bill.
Yep. We'll get our we'll get back to you guys after Jim and I talk.
Yeah, and that's going back to what I was saying earlier with those NASA reports and stuff. That's when those come in handy. Is things like that. Like the more you guys file those incidents, and I'm not saying like go file everything that was he was within 3 miles of me. That anything that was truly unsafe, by all means file it. And as the more documentation we have of that, the further we can go down a road like this. We can maybe try to amend what we do and the way we do things. And that's how all those go, is nobody knows about them unless you guys speak up and say something. So if we can identify that there's a problem there, then the more people that say it, and the users as well as us and the Minneapolis Center, and the more people start piling all these things up on a desk, they're going to, maybe we should do something. And that's how all those things get traction.
So we had I was involved in RA about 2 years ago, and once again, it was the same thing. we're listening to, I was a safety pilot, and I directed the pilot to bring up center so we knew what was going on. And we didn't catch so we're listening, and we didn't hear him until he was on base for a 2-8. And as Jim Serby says, at 200 knots, the 172 has trouble getting out of its own way. So I thought, damn, I'd just like to have a little bit more notice so we could stay clear. There was some confusion on our part also. So now would that RA go into the pile and they say, okay, this is, in fact, I wrote it up and I stated that I thought the center turned the aircraft over to you guys late.
Yeah, if there was an RA involved, we have our own internal paperwork that we have to do there's a whole list of events for, all sorts of emergencies and abnormal conditions and stuff like that. And that's one of those that if that happens, if it gets reported, we're doing a whole paperwork thing on it and tapes get pulled and it all gets evaluated. And whether it happened, one thing happens and okay, cool, it's done. And they just close it. But if they keep seeing like one facility or one or two facilities or something like where Minneapolis is giving it to us, and there's a constant thing of, oh, wow, in a year we've had 12 of these. Maybe there's something we need to do.
Okay.
That's how those things get identified, is through that kind of process.
All right, cool.
Well, and I'll just chime in too. We have QC processes even locally. So whenever we have a safety event that occurs in the facility, we do look at those and compile that information and look at it as a whole to see if we have a systemic issue that needs to be addressed, or if it's something that's happening infrequently and there might have been other factors involved. So as an agency and locally as a facility, we're always looking at safety related events and trying to improve how we work, whether it's improving through training, improving through equipment, or improving through our practices and our procedures. And we do take very seriously when we get feedback from our controllers who are working on the floor and when we get feedback from our pilots, because we also compile information that comes from the pilots, both the NASA reports and the CISP reports that come from commercials, so that we can learn from those situations.
So what observations, irritations are you getting from the GA crowd around out of Traverse? What should we be doing better or differently?
Well, I would let the two guys that generally are upstairs working traffic address that.
I figured, Ty works more than anything
I
like
I was going to say, for me personally, like when I'm up there, we understand training takes place just like it does in the tower. So we understand we get like sometimes some pilots that kind of get turned around a little bit, whether it be their first solo or, low hours or whatnot. So we try to take that into consideration. Sometimes them not understanding what the control instruction is and then just guessing. Well, I think he meant this or she meant this, but it's better for them just to ask for clarification. Like tower, can you clarify what that instruction is or whatever? We would rather have that any day of the week than someone just taking a stab at what they think that what we meant. Because some of us, I know, we use a lot of prescribed phraseology and standard phraseology. And when we train people, we always try to tell them stick to the phraseology because pilots, that's what they expect to hear. But sometimes there's situations to where there's not per se prescribed phraseology for that. So we have to put it in kind of layman's terms. And some people, even the controller might get, they might kind of convey the message in a way that's a little bit confusing. So it's always better for the pilot to come back, hey, can you clarify what your instruction was? Because I've seen where some incidents got pretty hairy because a low hours pilot or whatever didn't understand the instruction and just took a stab at it. I think is what took place.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah. When in doubt, always ask. That's the easiest thing. And that goes no matter what facility you're talking to, whether the center, TRACON, somewhere, anywhere. When in doubt, just ask. They might get grouchy. They might snip at you.
Right.
It is what it is, but better safe than sorry.
Yep. Yeah, I was, go ahead.
If I can introduce one more thing to that, just from my own air traffic experience and from going through the QC stuff, it's helpful to us as air traffic too when we get good readbacks from pilots. A lot of times we're not hearing, as I'm listening to the QC stuff, and I might be speaking more to my own experience rather than at Traverse City, but controllers a lot of times struggle to get readbacks with the call sign, so we know that we're getting the readback from the right aircraft, and we're also looking for readbacks with runway numbers. So when we're giving hold short instructions or a landing clearance, and we're just hearing cleared to land, or we're just hearing, okay, we'll hold short, without a call sign and without that runway number, that opens up risk that they may have misunderstood. What runway am I holding short of? What runway am I cleared to land on? Is that the correct pilot giving us that instruction, or did somebody else take that instruction? So those two very simple things, along with all of those things that Ty and Nick just said, can really help everybody maintain a more safe operation, you guys and us, because you know and we know that we're talking about the right runway and we're talking to the right airplane.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
Well, Nick and Ty and Matt, I wanted to just pass on our heartfelt appreciation for the good work you guys do day in and day out. And most of this conversation kind of got started, or the need for this conversation got started by the fact that we were going to miss you guys after 5 p.m. and felt a lot less safe tooling around Traverse City area without having the eyes of the towers watching over us. So.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah,
Anybody else have questions out there?
We'll get back to you guys about the how we can help in the tray cab.
Yeah. One more thing I guess I'd like to throw out there is sometimes we get pilots that they'll fly down the approach course of a runway we're advertising. We'll be advertising, say, 28 and 36, and we'll get a pilot that departs off 36 that's going eastbound, and they'll track outbound right down the approach corridor, which is not a problem if they let us know that that's their intention. It's not a good practice. I've seen this more from the college than anybody else. So, but they're not listening to their radios, and they're also flying right down the approach corridor for the advertised runway. And they figure once they get out of the Delta, they no longer need to listen to the radio, or they get busy training their trainee or whatever the case may be. I know that's one hazard that I've seen last year, not so much this year so far, but last year that was a hazard that I've seen quite a bit. Every once in a while it was not the college, it was, another GA aircraft. But I personally think it's a good practice. Like, if you're within 10 or 15 miles of Traverse City, to be listening to us, because even though you've left our airspace, traffic dependent, if we can watch over you, when we're not busy working a bunch of traffic right in the immediate vicinity, we're also going to be watching for you, 8 or 10 miles out from the airfield, traffic pending, if, we're not tied up doing other things right closer to the airport. So I know there's been times where I've tried to reach out to aircraft that were, 8 miles south of the field or southeast of the field, at 3,000 feet, and center is descending an air carrier, and we do a lot of coordination with the center. And those guys are doing their best. I know from my perspective, they're center controllers, so it's a different environment for them, acting more like a terminal approach controller. So when they're descending their guys and we're pointing out that traffic, y'all probably hear us assign squawk codes sometimes. And that also lets center know that we're talking to that VFR traffic if they're within, a short distance of the airfield. But usually when we assign those squawk codes, it's either to an aircraft that's performing a practice approach on our frequency, or an aircraft that's doing a practice holding, close to the airfield. So that way it gives center a heads up that we're talking to that VFR traffic. We also coordinate with center, like, hey, we have a Cessna 172, 5 miles southeast of the airport holding over the VOR at 3,000. And center's usually pretty good about working with us. But I notice when they do get really spun up and they're real busy, sometimes they revert back to their old tactics of just clearing an aircraft towards the VOR on a visual approach and shipping them to us. And sometimes if we're talking to, it's busy and we're talking to a lot of aircraft, we might not get to that air carrier, or he might not check on right off the bat because he's waiting for the frequency to kind of free up, and then airplanes kind of get close together. So I think that's another benefit if we had approach control over us, and especially a tray cab, where the approach controller would be right in the tower. You're nudging your buddy that's right to your left or right, saying, hey, I got that VFR guy right here, blah, 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 miss him. And the center, or the approach controller in theory would provide appropriate separation to that aircraft. With getting a hold of center, sometimes it's also a issue for us sometimes, because when they're real busy, they might not be able to pick up the landline when we're calling them for a couple minutes, because they're making a transmission every few seconds because they're real busy. The center has told me that Traverse City by itself, when we're real busy in the summertime, can tank their whole sector. So that just gives you kind of an idea of how busy Traverse City can get just in the summertime.
Yeah, another thing to add to that is like that whole sector that Ty was just saying that we can send them down the tubes. Is that same sector, especially come 4th of July weekend and a normal summer, of course, but the summer weekends, that same sector is working Mackinac Island, St. Ignace, Charlevoix, Petoskey, Harbor Springs. They're working all those airports. So when you get all those guys from down south or Chicago that are flying to Bonanzas and Cirrus is up there and they're all IFR, they're turning 4, 5, 6 people onto the approaches all at the same time at every one of those little airports. So that's why, just because they're not necessarily busy here doesn't mean they're not busy 100 miles away. And if it's only one person sitting in the scope, you can only do so much.
Right.
So it's one of those kind of things just to add on to that. And like the example Ty was saying, don't fly down the finals. Like a lot of times we'd have like someone would go over to Kalkaska, go do a touch and go, and then come back to Traverse. And that line from Kalkaska to Traverse City is pretty much right down the final.
Yep.
And you don't really have to call for a few miles out of Kalkaska because you're not at the edge of the airspace yet. But if you're on the perfect spot to get hit by a CRJ or an Airbus that's coming down the final there. So that's why we asked to just offset, even if it's only a mile, but just offset just a little bit and aim for a left downwind or something like that instead of right down the runway until you're actually talking to us.
Okay.
But that's good advice. Probably also applies to places like Empire as well.
Yeah, that would be another one.
Yeah.
But as far as y'all are asking us questions about stuff that y'all could do better, as far as the facility, is there any feedback that y'all want to give us that would be helpful for y'all?
I've had nothing but professionalism. You did gig me once because I missed the turn off on C when I was landing on 3.6, but I think you told me I had trouble finding the runway, and my response was I thought you lowered it. No, you guys are good. You're professional. You're helpful. Your communications are clear and concise. It works just fine for me.
Well,
Yeah,
if y'all ever do come up with anything, like Nick and like Matt was saying, give the tower a call. Let's discuss it. If there's anything we can do to improve the operation, especially when it's pertaining to safety, because we're all about safety. It doesn't matter. Obviously the pilots are all about safety. The controllers are all about safety. So if there's something that we can do that improves procedure, that makes it more safe, within reason that we can do it, then we're all about that. So
I got another question just came up. Frequently we see those heavy military copter helos come in, the 47s, the 60s. They stir up a huge amount of lift. And what provisions do you guys have for spotting them on the ramp out there in front of Ad-Flight?
as far as, could you explain what you mean by like spotting them out on the ramp? Like
a 60 or 47 can generate enough turbulence to send a 172 skittering along the ramp. And who knows what's going to come this summer, but if the ramp's busy and one of those 60s or 47s are there, it's a sporty time just because of all the turbulence generated by the rotors. So do you have any provisions or to accommodate that?
As far as our rules and regulations, it just tells us, we shouldn't be clearing those type helicopters for takeoff in close proximity to like taxiing aircraft or whatever, like the smaller GA, like the Cessnas and whatnot. I would think, I would hope that most controllers, and then this is something that we can bring up in our facility too, about, if you have a Chinook or a H-60 Blackhawk or whatever out on the ramp, ground taxi them out to the parallel taxiway, then clear them for takeoff. But in theory, most of the controllers should know better than clearing one of those guys for takeoff with a Cessna part right next to it. And I would think the Army pilots, and I'm going to make jokes about the Army because I was Air Force, would be smart enough to know, hey, I know my aircraft generates a ton of turbulence, and I've worked Department of Defense as civilian. I've marshaled those Chinooks in the parking before, and one actually blew me over one time. So I definitely know they will generate some turbulence. So, I mean, Nick and Matt, feel free to piggyback on it, but that's something we can talk in the facility and kind of pass the word like, hey, be considerate of clearing these guys for takeoff if they're in any close proximity to even a parked Cessna or, a small GA aircraft or whatnot.
Yeah.
If I'm understanding what you were asking correctly.
Yes, yeah, and and you're spot on about the Army guys, right, Jim?
Yeah, I think in the facility, we could have a discussion about giving a cautionary for rotor wash, and just having some awareness of the impact that it might have on a smaller aircraft. That's certainly something that we could discuss. And in our facility, we have what's called Local Safety Council, which is a collaborative effort between the bargaining unit and includes a management member, and we review safety data. And that's certainly something that Local Safety Council, if not another process, could look at to see what we might do to address that.
Yeah. To go back with your provision there, the only like true rule, and I use rule in loose air quotes because it's a should thing, that there's I think it's 3 rotor discs in diameter, or 3 rotor discs away from the nearest airplane. Like you're saying, a Cessna on the ramp, if you have a Blackhawk there, in theory, we're supposed to keep them 3 rotor diameters away from them. Okay. Whether that's possible or not, and who's got a tape measure out there to measure. So it's one of those, just, give them a wide berth and let them have at it kind of thing. But the other thing that I'd like to bring up is, I grew up in an EAA chapter. I've been flying for 15 years and stuff. And one thing that's always struck me, there was a video, I don't know how many of you guys have seen it. It's probably 6-8 years old now. I want to say it was out in like Pennsylvania or something like that. It was a pancake breakfast Saturday morning, and the National Guard brought a Blackhawk in. And there's a video on YouTube, you can find it. It's like a security camera looking at like a fuel farm, but you can see like in the background is where the runway is. The Blackhawk taxis out onto the runway, picks it up into a hovered for maybe 10, 12 seconds and starts to go. And then he disappears out of frame, and 19 seconds later, a Cirrus departs behind him and then starts like right wing low and then cartwheeled into the runway. Yes. And there's a lot of speculation, and the pilot died in it, so nobody really knows what happened. But there's a lot of speculation that the rotor wash was still there, or remnants of it was still there, and that's what he encountered. And being slow and, everything's still not up to full authority on the control surfaces, that's in theory why he crashed. There's a lot of speculation around it still. But that's something to think about, especially with the Coast Guard, because they do tons of touch and goes out there. And if you're coming right behind them, that might be something to kind of keep in mind there. And we have no separation requirements between you guys as long as, whoever's first or second, as long as we have the correct number of footage between down the runway from where he is to where you are. That's the only requirement we have. We have no separation for wake turbulence. That's on you guys. So if you guys want more space, take your downwind out another 15 seconds before you turn, or let us know. And obviously, if you're number 7 in the downwind, let us know before you do that. Don't just do it, because then it's just going to stretch the final out that much further. Let us know that you want more space in there. So that's always an option as well.
Right. Cool. All right. Good. Yep. All right. Jim?
I'm good, and I want to thank all you guys in the tower. I'm afraid to ask how you guys are working, and yet again, and your hours getting shortened. That's probably hard on your families, and I guess I apologize. Ask is there anything we can do to help you guys in that way?
I know as far as on behalf of the union, I think everybody's doing pretty good. I do somewhat of a temperature check, so to say, with the labor force. pretty regularly. I'd say once or twice a week, and it seems like everybody's doing fine. Morale's still high. Everybody's pushing through it. Everyone understands what what the situation is, and I mean things are pretty good. I would say, considering that everyone's been real professional. Everybody's been pulling their fair share of weight, and everyone's working really well together in the tower. So I know as far as the labor force, I haven't heard any complaints, but they don't always come to me, even though I'm the representative. Sometimes they'll go to a member of management and say, hey, this popped off or this happened or whatever. But for the most part, 99% of the time, they'll come to me first because it's kind of the protocol because we're 100% union. As far as the labor force here, most of your line controllers or all the line controllers. But that's not to say that they don't go to management and say, hey, I have this going on, that going on, or whatever. But no, everyone seems to be, real happy and getting along just fine. And, just besides the some of the minor inconveniences, I mean, things seem to be 100%. So.
Well, if it turns out there's anything we can do to help the FAA community, just raise your hand.
Oh, I appreciate it.
All right. Cool. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. We really sincerely, deeply appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank you
having
for
us.
involving us.
Yeah, you betcha.
Bye.
Right. Cool. And I'm gonna take a little break.
Christian,
Howdy.
are you out there? We wanna jump
I
in
am.
and give us
Can-
a lecture on drones?
Yeah, can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Justin just clicked our spotlight video, so I think we should be in your full screen now. If you're not, in the top right, I got to get my directions right. I'm not a meteorologist on camera yet. I think up in the top right should be a speaker view button. That will get us into most of your full screen, which should help. So is everybody feeling up to the presentation still, or do you guys want to table this again for our next month's meeting? I can get through this in about 20-30 minutes, but it's interesting, so probably worth sticking around for if you're interested.
Let's roll.
Yeah, I'm up.
Let's
Here's
roll.
to-
Well, I will take no offense if anyone has to bail out. Frankly, I can't see all of the people on here, so if you run away, it's not going to bother me in the slightest. So I am going to go through a couple of PowerPoint slides. We're going to throw some videos in. We'll show you a quick live demo of Zenith, all the above. So Justin's going to be my tech guy here for the day today. So we're going to go ahead and kick on the PowerPoint first. All right. So everybody seeing the slides okay?
Yes. I am.
Hopefully most are. Well, Justin and I are going to go through a couple of slides here. We're going to talk about a handful of things today, but we'll talk mainly about the history of UAVs and what they have to do with Traverse City. We'll talk about NMC's program, the local college here, a little bit about our company and what we do. We'll talk about drones and what they're used for in the general usage today, and then what's going on with the FAA. And I have some FAA guys here to fact check me if I'm totally wrong, so that'll be good. So interesting, and this might be the most interesting part of the presentation, so I may lead off with cool, and then it may get more boring from here. But after Pearl Harbor, the government was looking for a safe place to train pilots. And with Lake Michigan being completely surrounded by land and for the most part, they could keep things pretty quiet and secret. So they took two older, smaller cruise ships and they made them into aircraft carriers, small little aircraft carriers. And of all places, they decided to park it in the Traverse City Bay. So the USS Sable made it here into the Traverse City Bay for some light flight training back in 1942 and 1943. And wouldn't you know it, the drone industry started off of this carrier right here in our home local Traverse City Bay. So the first military remotely piloted aircraft were flown off of this carrier right here in Traverse City. So the TDN-1 that you guys see here on the right-hand side of our screen, you can see there's no pilot sitting in the seat here. So that would be an empty pilot seat. So the first military flown remotely piloted aircraft. So big question, was it successful in the old Traverse City Bay? Not really. So there were a handful of these aircraft that crashed, and if there are any divers in our group here, you may be able to go scour the bottom, and if there's anything left from 1942 and 1943, you may fish out the first remotely piloted aircraft from history, which is the early part of the drone industry, which is pretty cool. So we've got some heritage here, and it makes me feel better about being a drone company here in Traverse City. And if you guys aren't seeing it in full screen, in the top right, there should be a speaker view button. And Justin can, I don't know if you can hit the spotlight. So did Traverse City get any better at drones over the course of time? Yes, they got significantly better at drones. So today we have a handful of cool things in the drone community here. The center cluster of the central nervous system of the drone community here in Traverse City is from NMC. So the UAV program at the college, it's actually celebrating its 10-year anniversary this fall. So in the fall of 2010 was their first official classes of the UAV program. It was a spin-off from the aviation program. There was no engineering associated with it at that time. But basically they were building RC airplanes, teaching people how to fly them, and they were offering them as electives in aviation. And back in those days, in the early 2010s, they were sending absolutely everybody to the Department of Defense. So the DoD took a lot of these people and made them military, Global Hawk, and other pilots. So they added on the engineering tech program in 2012. So basically they started teaching people how to build, fix, repair, make drones, and they started an engineering program with UAS. And that's still a big core competency for the school today. So not only do they teach pilots, but they also teach people how to build and maintain those as well, which is pretty cool. They integrate in a lot of other programs like Michigan State University for their ag program. At the bottom of the screen, we were actually the first people in the United States to take delivery of the new crop spraying drone. So this drone on the bottom of the screen here is the DJI Agris, and it actually applies aerial chemicals, and NMC was the first people to have them. Cherryland Electric is the folks in the picture there in the center of the screen. They're learning how to use drones for power line inspections and various things like that. And they have a couple of other larger fixed wing aircraft like you see on the table there that Carl is working on. So a large gamut of things, and they're still shelling out people today. Most of their graduates in UAS are going to weird companies like Duke Energy, Amazon. There's a lot of people at Amazon there spearheading the beginning of the package delivery world. We will get to that at the end of the presentation. SkySpecs, who does a lot of wind turbine inspections, and various engineering firms that are incorporating drones into their typical surveys. And they're also teaching outside groups as well. So, any questions on NMC's program? Cool. Well, there was one cool little startup company that came out of NMC's program back in 2015 and 16, and that was our company. So Justin and I and our two business partners started Interactive Aerial, and it was all thanks to the drone program there at the school. So our company is focused on building robotics. It started with drones, got into other stuff, but building drones for internal inspections. So whereas most people fly outside and do inspection work on the outdoors, we focus on doing internal inspections. And we have a cool little video here that we're starting to play for all of our demos. So we thought we'd give you guys a look at it. The audio should play through. If it's not, we're still working through those tech difficulties. So someone pipe up if it's not working, but go ahead and give that a shot.
One of the unique things about Interactive Aerial is our whole manufacturing process is designed to do things in-house. We do the development in-house and we do the manufacturing in-house, all right here in Traverse City. Our original product, the Legacy One, is all designed and built here in Traverse City, and we also do all of our training here in our fly room out in the back of our facility. So when customers purchase a vehicle, we bring them into Traverse City for a 2-day, very intensive training program to make sure they're very comfortable with all the features of the Legacy One. The Zenith product is very unique. It's very simple to operate. So we've designed the whole training process on Zenith to do via video. They can do all their training remotely. Interactive Aerial provides a safe environment for their employees to perform inspections that used to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And now we're able to do these inspections in a fraction of the time and do it safely. And that's pretty amazing that you know, we've got now several solutions to allow customers to do that.
Cool. Well, there's a little a video clip about some of the work that we do here in Traverse City. We have to brag for just a super quick second. Last week we were selected as Traverse City's winning business for best emerging business in Traverse City, which we're pretty excited about. So very thankful for that award from the judges, and that's at Traverse Connect. So we're kind of on cloud nine just a little bit from that whole awards last week. Just a quick overview of our timeline. So we got started in 2015, built the drone in 16, brought it to market in 17. If anyone's familiar with the demo tank, or well, it's our demo tank, if you're familiar with the cistern up in Grand Traverse Commons or the old state hospital, we actually cleaned that out and we use that for flight demonstrations, and you saw parts of that in the video there. We started doing inspection services in 2018, where we go out and actually do the inspection work for people. And then just this last summer created Zenith, which is our new product. We'll give you like a 1-minute demo of here pretty quickly, but it's a patent pending system for other internal environments. So, list of some of our existing customers. So we're pretty proud of the folks that we have on board buying our systems and also buying our services. So whether we're going out to do the inspections for them or they're learning how to use it on their own. So we've got 2 hardware products. We've got the Legacy One, which is our aircraft, our drone. That's our LiDAR based aircraft. So it uses lasers to basically learn its environment and then to stay away from hitting things, excuse me, keep away from hitting things. And it's got a 42 megapixel camera on there, so it flies inside of places and does inspections that way. Zenith is our new tool, which is inspired by drone technology. So it does basically uses drone paddles for the inside of the system to keep its heading and all that good stuff. So we're going to boot this up here real quick and show you guys a quick demo of the system. But you can see it's got the live screen up on the top of the controller. You know how many lights there. But you see a live screen of what the system sees there. And then I'll fire up the paddles here so you can hear those. So there's actually 2 rotating drone motors in the inside of the box, and that's what it's using to keep its heading. So I can use the controller to spin it around. And then we would tilt the camera up and down to do inspections. So basically, you put this pole inside of an environment, and then we use the controller to go up and down with the system to go down hundreds of feet. It can go super quick, or it can go nice and slow up and down and rotate left and right and all that good stuff. So that's our cool new product for inspections. It keeps its heading even if you hit it. So if you bump into it and all that good stuff, it's going to fight to keep on heading all the time, and do that cool stuff. So
Cool.
so that's our new product, Zenith. And we have already sold a handful of those and delivering them to other folks here. I'm going to hand that off to you because I am not able to manage that at the moment. So getting back to our PowerPoint here, we have a handful of software products basically where you can measure defects. It tells you where you're at, and we partnered with Westinghouse Nuclear, and we're doing artificial intelligence for automated defects. So basically, it finds them for you and you don't have to do it yourself. The computers do it, which is pretty cool. Awesome story with general aviation we thought would be fun to share with you guys. We delivered our first 2 Zeniths just this last month, but unfortunately with the virus and the pandemic shutdown stuff, we did not have a super easy time delivering them via FedEx or UPS. Our first customer was taking it to a nuclear plant the next day, so we needed priority overnight shipping, which they were unable to give us and guarantee because of the virus. So we contracted some local help here. It's Steve Melvin on the field, 206 Turbo, and we asked Steve if it was okay if he would fly us to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to hand deliver our first Zenith to Westinghouse Nuclear, which he gladly accepted. So Justin and I piled in. It was on Justin's birthday, so Justin got to spend his birthday flying to Pittsburgh, and we delivered our first Zenith to them. They hand delivered it and took it to a nuke plant the next day in Canada, which is pretty cool. We left at 7:30 in the morning, and I was back at my desk by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which was a big win for general aviation and for our business. And my CEO does not know it yet, but it was the first in an effort to get a company airplane. But that's the start of a sales pitch that he has yet to see quite yet. So what else are drones being used for? So a plethora of applications in the inspection industry yet. That Wingtra on the top left of the screen there is a hybrid drone. So it takes off straight up and then it tilts and turns into like it's a vertical lift and takeoff and then turns.
Where'd you go? Did you guys lose him?
Yes, lost him.
Yeah, I didn't hear anything.
Yeah, lost the audio.
Lost audio.
Nothing here.
All right.
Anybody have his cell phone number? Give him a call.
Yeah.
No signal. Replace the battery.
Stand by. Okay. Should we call Christian Smith?
Calling Christian Smith.
Okay. Well, we got part of it back anyway. Nope. Had you there for a sec.
Now can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Are we all back? You can
Was that-
see it here.
Was that a bathroom break?
Yeah, that's why I secretly really had to go to the bathroom. This is why we employ brilliant people like Justin Bentsen. When this disastrous stuff happens, Justin saves my butt on a regular basis. Thanks, Justin. All right, cool beans.
Yay.
Back to learning about drones. Sorry. You know, this is the first time we've actually gone through and used our lovely multi-$1,000 studio room, and we're learning as we go. So you guys are our poor test subjects. Sorry about that. All right, back at you live. We'll wrap up this thing pretty quickly here. So drones used for cool stuff like vertical lift and takeoff. That is used for things like you see at the bottom of the screen. So that is like hundreds of thousands of pictures all stitched into one large, what they call photogrammetry model. So you can use that for volume calculations. So like that quarry, they could calculate how much rock has already disappeared from that quarry in a single month period. So a lot of wild applications of things like that. And our friends at Michigan State Police use it for law enforcement. And basically every law enforcement division in the country now uses drones for its routine work as well. I need to get back to my PowerPoint. There. Drones also used for a wide variety of things in Hollywood. If any of you guys enjoy YouTube stuff, on the left-hand side is Trent Palmer's company. So if you're familiar with Trent Palmer's flying videos, his day job, that's actually his company on the left. It's Sky Copter Kids. And they do a bunch of shooting for Hollywood. So chances are any of the commercials that you see on television that look like helicopters, it's probably Trent Palmer's company now. And that's a various mirage of his cool jobs there. And then real estate photos, things like that. There's tons of applications for drones, and they're used in just about every industry, period, nowadays. So wrapping things up here on FAA regulations and where things are headed. The Part 107 remote pilot certificate. So that is required for any commercial work. So if you're using drones to make money, you have to have that FAA Part 107. For my pilot friends on board, that is an actual pilot certificate. So you'd have to go in and take an FAA written test, and that's how you would actually get certified to fly drones for commercial use. If you don't have it already, I think you still have to have it even if you're a private pilot nowadays. There are more problems with hobbyists. So typically the commercial people are adhering to rules pretty well. Crazy hobbyist people that don't know the rules are more of the concern. So just as an FYI, it's not us hardworking laborers. The technology has become much more reliable, however, so a lot of things like geofencing and no-fly zones, those sorts of things for drones are making airports much safer, and they're even starting to integrate ADS-B into UAS. So, you know, things like DJI, the global leading manufacturer, is actually starting to put ADS-B into their systems. So have no fear, the tracking has begun. FAA has already noticed a proposed rulemaking in for the RFID, which is identifying drones on their location, their altitude, and their type, so it can be better enforced on rules and things like that. So I would say the scary years with drones in the GA community is getting better and better. They're starting to get more robust and things like that. So, you know, there are still some interesting things like them flying next to the Blue Angels in Detroit yesterday. If you have not seen that video, that is wild. That was a little nerve-wracking. So check that out on Google if you have not seen that. But my last slide is what to expect next from the drone industry. The second revolution will come with an adaptation of beyond visual line of sight. So being able to fly drones further than what we can see them as humans. That will be a big revolution for people like Amazon to deliver your package, Domino's to deliver your pizza, and hopefully the local liquor store to deliver beer or wine if you run out of that. That will be a great add-on as well. Don't expect to see that anytime soon, however. 2025 will probably be where it's more widely accepted. The FAA is certainly taking more of a crawl, walk, run philosophy. So they will take baby steps into introducing this into routine operation. They have already begun doing some deliveries and pizza deliveries and things like that in quieter parts of the country. So if people ask you, are they doing it yet? You can say yes, because they are. It's just not happening very routinely yet, but expect to see that a little bit more as time goes on. So with that, that is about all I have to bore you with on the drone industry. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Yeah, I got a couple. I wonder how long before we see dope deliveries with drones.
Dope deliveries, that probably sooner than later, if I'd have to guess.
Jiminy Christmas. Hey, tell me a little bit about GPS denied drones. And is that where you use the LiDAR?
Yes. So that is what we use the LiDAR for. It spins like 300. So this thing on the top of the drone, it looks like a hockey puck. It's 360 degrees spinning. So it spins 10 times per second and captures up to 16,000 points. So it's basically a little laser that takes a distance measurement on everything around it. And it uses that to know where it is in space, and then how to keep away from walls and objects is all through the LiDAR.
And that goes into the database then?
Yep. So we store it on our black box with the aircraft. Our software page was our photo location tagging. So basically, it takes that black box information and tags it with a picture. So when you look at a defect in a boiler, you can say, we know right where that picture was taken from.
Right. Okay. And that's independent of the actual drone then?
Correct.
That database. Okay, cool.
Yep.
The DJI,
Yes.
the military has moved away from them because of concerns of the commies. And are you guys using any of their equipment?
We do not use much of it. We have some outdoor drones that we use that are DJI. There's a large debate going on if it's acceptable to use those in the federal government. So any of the military has stopped using them. Department of Interior has banned them. Right. And there's now a huge question mark on law enforcement being able to use them, which really sucks because they're really good at it. They make killer drones, not literal killer drones. They're really good drones. Sorry, probably bad choice words, but they make really nice equipment, and so it's so great, and it's such a low price point. It's easy for our law enforcement offices to buy them, aka saving you guys tax dollars. So if that goes into effect, they're gonna have to buy much more expensive equipment, which is gonna suck.
Yeah.
Christian, anybody at the college working on drones with a higher payload, up around 1,000 pounds, 1,500?
I don't know quite that much. Some bigger drones coming out of the college, but not quite that big.
We work with a fellow who's in agricultural spraying, and he would, we've looked at the DJI ag drones. They really aren't doing the job for large fields, and he'd like to carry maybe 100 gallons, 200 gallons to spray fields at night where you can get down close, air's quiet. Right now he's flying turbo thrusters.
Yeah, and the Agris has been used for more of like spot-specific applications in fields, so where they see like little clusters of issues, they can go do that, but widespread deployment isn't quite there yet. So we're getting there. There's a Yamaha drone that does a bit more, but I don't know that it's quite that payload size yet.
So when you mentioned spot applications, there's sensors aboard the drones that can see this pest.
Yep. Yeah, they usually do a lot of, isn't it thermal, Justin? They do a lot of thermal. Yeah, DVI and thermal, where they can see actual dry spots within fields. So they fly over to get an assessment of where the bad areas are using a drone payload, and then turn around to use a drone to apply it to those spots too. Right. Cool.
You guys sell or rent or both?
All the above. So we will sell these things to end users and teach them on how to use it. We will go out and do the inspection for them if they choose not to to have us come, or if they choose not to buy it and bring it in-house, they can have us come out and do it for them. We also just signed a national rental agreement with a company out of Houston that will be renting Zenith. So this will be rentable by the day now, and we'll go to plants countrywide. They're taking first delivery of theirs, actually, I hope this week or next. So they'll be starting the rental revolution of the company here pretty quickly. It should probably be an enormous round of problems.
So the Zenith can handle how big how big's the application? A couple hundred feet?
Yeah, so on the depth, it can go, our standard spool inside here holds 550 feet. For going down in the depth size, the width that it can inspect, it depends on the level of detail. The guys just did a 100-foot wide tank in Virginia last week, and it turned out fairly well because they have holes on every side of the tank. So they just dropped them into other holes and then did the whole tank that way. That was a wastewater tank. Justin earned his pay last week. We made him take multiple showers when he got home.
I said that's the first time, Justin.
Yeah.
Who's your competition? How much competition do you have?
Now, there's one primary competitor. They're from Switzerland, and they make a drone that actually is in, like, think about a beach ball size. So they put their drone inside of the ball, and they do more collision tolerant stuff where they, like, bump up against things. And that's not necessarily like us versus them all the time. They actually have a lot of people that buy theirs and ours and use them complementary to each other.
Huh. Damn. In the Jim's got a question for you.
Yeah, I was just looking at Jim's question, the job market for licensed pilots. It's a good question and frankly a good debate. I don't know that there will be tons and tons more open jobs yet until the second revolution of beyond line of sight happens. So a lot of power companies, a lot of like inspection companies, engineering firms, real estate people are taking licensed drone pilots now. Still some in the military, but the military has really gone towards full-blown licensed pilots to fly their drones nowadays. But I would see another big influx of hiring in the licensed pilot world when the second revolution of beyond line of sight happens, when they start delivering pizzas and boxes and things like that.
Christian, I'm a member of the Midland fan club of Interactive Aerial.
All right.
And we were so proud and so excited for you all last Friday morning when it was announced that you won the Emerging Business Award.
Thank you.
And can you give us a little clue what happened afterwards, after the cameras stopped rolling?
Our CEO grabbed me and said, "Enough celebrating, let's get to work." And we went and talked about budgets. So that was it was a really boring day, but the four of us guys celebrated in the evening and drank beer, and that was fun. So we were on cloud nine for all of about 15 seconds until we were told get back to work. That's our slave driving CEO, which is a very good person to have around. He keeps the ship tight around here. So we were celebrating for a little while.
That's good.
This is Dot Hornsby from Midland. I would like to see Justin beside the guy. Justin, get on the camera.
Our tech guy.
Yay!
Here's our tech guy, Justin.
Proud of you guys. Yoo-hoo.
Thank you.
Oh.
Say hello to the people, Justin. Hello.
You make us proud. Thank you.
Thank you, Dot. And
Yeah.
thanks, Linda, Grant, all of our Midland friends joining us today.
Yeah.
And Robert and Sandy are here from Traverse City, and Claire.
Mm-hmm.
This presentation ought to come to our local EAA chapter.
Well, we've got a great Zoom setup when it works. So
Yeah.
sometimes we find those bugs still.
1093. Yeah.
We would be happy to do that.
Awesome.
We'd be happy to load the twins to you.
Fraternal, not identical.
Right.
Close.
Oh, love it. Oh.
Okay, cool.
And any other questions we can answer for you guys, or you feel all educated in the drone space now?
Oh, one thing, those original drones that flew during the war, World War II.
Yep.
I believe the controls were all transmitted via analog phones, which is absolutely wild.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, it really does say, like, if you scour the internet, it's like Traverse City's first military drone. It's just weird to see that, and it's a cool part of our ability to have a drone company here and say, well, we were here and true the world's first. That's our big knock on the drone industry. Everybody's got the world's first this or that. It drives us crazy, but we can have bragging rights and say that we really did.
I'm just glad that you're in northern Michigan and not down in Houston.
Thanks,
We are
Brian.
too.
Thanks, Brian. You know more than anybody in the world.
There's enough of those guys down there in Houston.
We know the water's more blue up here, so.
Absolutely.
You guys have pretty much all returned home, haven't you? I think Aaron is downstate, but the rest of the gang is all back here, aren't they?
It's the only one down there still is Nick.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And Nick was involved with the NMC program. He went over to play in the sandbox in Afghanistan for a while, flying drones over there.
Oh, I'll be damned.
Yeah, for those of you guys who don't know the backstory, so Brian was a part of ATOS group. ATOS started at the college, and they were the ones that brought us the idea for building this thing, and asked us to help them with that. So
There he goes. Time to get put Justin back to work.
Yeah.
All right, what else we got? We'll give them a chance to come back on board.
Mhm.
What's the buggish? And he's back.
can you hear me?
Yes.
See, I leave for 5 seconds and everything starts falling apart.
That's why we pay Justin the big bucks. Well, we don't need to take much more of your guys' time this evening. So only 2 total disasters out of our first demo. That's not too bad. We figured out that the camera times out. That's what keeps killing it. So we're going to have to do some research after we get done. Probably that's tomorrow's job. We're going home.
Well done, guys. Justin.
Yeah, thank you.
Christian, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Well done. Thank you.
Looking forward to getting back to our newfound office environment. Would be nice one of these days, but we'll keep up the Zoom work for now.
All right, cool.
We appreciate it. Thank you, Christian.
Thank you.
We'll put the recording up on Jim. You and I can work on a YouTube link, and we'll get it put up on the website for anyone to look at later on. So.
All right. Well done. Thank you.
Consider not terrible. Thanks, guys. Appreciate everyone for sticking around. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yeah.
That was very interesting.
Good night, all.